everyone. Welcome and thank you for being here. I think we'll get started because we're at 4:35. Just want to make sure you can hear me and it's loud and clear. It's good. Yeah.
And you can also hear me as well. Amazing. Thank you. I think we can start while we wait for Sarah to come back with the. Okay. Amazing. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming to our talk. I'm Faqir Bilal. I'm the product director at Edly. I'm joined by my colleague.
My name is Asad. I head the learning design and development division within Edly as well.
Oh, of course. For sure. Okay, amazing. So the title of our talk is what we often get wrong about learning engagement and how to fix it. So both of us have been working in the edtech industry for more than a decade. And we've worked on different platforms. We've worked with hundreds of companies. And one of our takeaways is that every company and almost every platform tends to have their own definition of engagement. Sometimes it's something that's related to the platform. Sometimes it pertains to a specific use case. There are also instances where it's related to cognitive engagement or social engagement. And so before we start, it would be great to hear some of your definitions of engagement or how you measure engagement at your organization or for your platform.
Well, I think that's the part where we have to wait for Sarah because she has apparently.
Or we can just feel free to speak up.
Yeah, if you just want to, I can bring the mic as well if any of you would like to share. Yeah.
So I think there's a wide variety of answers. Some of the more common ones I've heard is successfully completing like a certification exam, so meeting actual criteria, but also I would say learner engagement could also be course completion.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else that would like to share? No, okay. Well. You can go first and then.
Just problem clicks, video views, entering the course.
Okay,
awesome.
Great.
So anytime that you present, you look at the audience and you see that there is some feedback. For me, engagement is some feedback where connection is made during consumption of the course.
Awesome. You use the term connection, and I think we'll come to that in a minute because that's relevant.
And so what I'd also like to ask you all is engagement in context of online learning versus in classroom settings. So for example, including this physical setting, do you think engagement, the idea of engagement is same in both contexts or different? Raise your hand for same. And different. Awesome, so we'll talk about that as well.
Yeah, just curious though, because we saw a lot of people raising hand when it said different. Anyone that would like to share that now? We are gonna get to that. We'll be connecting it with a couple of models as well as some of our own practice. But anyone that would like to share maybe in one or two words how you think it's different? And now we have the box, so it's more fun if you want to answer. Going one now? Okay.
Got a catch. I'm so impressed that I caught that. I have horrible hand-eye coordination. Well, for our platform, I work for a platform called Challenge U. We're an online platform for adults who have dropped out of high school and want to go back to get their diploma. So we offer the online courses for them to go back and get their pass their exam and then get their high school diploma. For us, engagement is very different because they're doing their courses, like I'm sure many of you, asynchronously, but engagement for them could happen really at any hour of the day. We have messages to teachers that they can send, even things like hint buttons and more information buttons that exist on our platform that allow them to engage in a deeper way with the material and get a more in-depth understanding of it. it's not necessarily translated into the physical classroom necessarily, or it's not done in the same way. So obviously you can ask your teacher for help in the physical classroom, but the way that you're getting your support online varies a little bit. So I think that engagement exists in both environments, but the way that the engagement gets kind of carried out in the online way is, to me, very different.
Okay,
So, yeah.
thank you. So there is a different manifestation. Thank you.
We work for the same company, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to introduce anything else. But there's the key element for us, which is what we find is very different, is the learn at your own pace situation, and at the moment that you can, given that we are teaching adults that did not finish high school in the first place, so they have already complicated lives, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
I think you also raised your hand. Yeah,
But
go ahead, please.
the only difference I see between the engagement when you are in presence versus online, when you are in presential, you have a social environment that help you to be more engaged than when you are online, because online you don't have friends or other people doing the same thing as you do. So
Awesome.
that's the difference.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Very, very enriching. It's one of my favorite things about presenting a talk like this, because these are things that resonate with, I think, a lot of us. I think in the beginning, we mentioned some metrics more about course completion, getting into the course, clicks and things like that. And I think later on, Dimitri, if I'm not wrong, I think you mentioned the word connection, right? And then you mentioned the word messages outside of let's say, the time, right? So with the faculty, and then you talked about the social environment. It's perfect because it's a good segue into the definition that we wanted to use for the purposes of this talk. So in 2004, Fredericks, Blumenfield, and Paris, by the way, we didn't just pick this because we're in Paris, it's just the definition that we tend to use. But they talk about engagement as a multidimensional construct that includes three essential dimensions, if you will, right? So the behavioral one, emotional one, and cognitive one. Loosely defined, the behavioral engagement will include all of the activities like course completion, anything that you do within the context of the learning intervention is part of the behavioral engagement. So whatever you're doing to accomplish those academic and social activities, the definition of the achievement in that context would be getting to the end of the course so that you can take a quiz, so that you can get a certificate like you referred to earlier, would still be an academic activity in that context, per their definition, per their construct. Emotional engagement, on the other hand, would be some sort of a reaction that comes out of those interactions that you have. Could be positive, could be negative, could be neutral, doesn't matter, but there is going to be some sort of a reaction. So emotionally, how much invested are you in the context of that intervention, whether that is online or presential, like you said. And then finally is the cognitive engagement, the investment that you have at a cognitive level, the effort that you need to exercise to be able to understand any issues. And here they use the term complex ideas. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think there is a cognitive effort that's involved with every idea. It could be the simplest of the context, but of course, going back to the information processing model, there's going to be some cognitive effort involved, so I'm not going to, but anyway, that's the key idea. Now, in 2018, Redmond and their colleagues, they proposed this definition, which sort of builds upon the previous one, but it's more suited to online environments and adult learning environments in particular. So they expanded on it, and in addition to behavioral, cognitive, and emotional, they talked about the social and the collaborative dimension. One could argue that the last three are sort of the same in the sense that you have to be emotionally involved to have a social connection, and vice versa. And if you're collaborating with your colleagues, you're going to have some sort of social presence. That's a fair critique, but again, for the purposes of this for this talk, we'll keep those dimensions in mind, because that's what we're gonna focus on, and that's, I think, what seems to be the most practical one in our analysis. So you talked about talking to faculty earlier, right? Again, if you look at all of the work from Redmond, if you look at all of the work from other authors and scholars that we mentioned before, they say that there are so many different aspects of connection or communication that you can have for there to be engagement in your interventions. But those three are essential. And they have always been essential. It's not a new concept. It was here in the 80s, it was here in the 70s, long before distance education became, well, I mean, there was distance education in the 80s too, but I mean, this goes back to, for those of you that know Aston's model of school involvement and school engagement, right? So back in 84 and 94, essentially they say that the learner has to have some sort of engagement, some sort of interaction with the content itself. So the learning material that they're working with, the exercises, the tasks, the reading, assignments, everything that's in there, they have to have an interaction with it. But they have to have some sort of peer-to-peer interaction. We can get to the formats, we can get to the modality, whether it's a discussion forum, a bulletin board, whether it's whatever that is, but there has to be some sort of learner-to-learner interaction for there to be engagement. And the third one is the learner-to-faculty or the learner-to-instructor interaction. It has to be there, because if it's not there, then it is not, there's no teaching presence that's there. Then it's just completely and entirely self-guided learning, which you could do from blog posts or articles or whatever modality that exists out there. So we're not going to be talking about that. So does anyone disagree with this part so far? And it's very welcome if you do, but just saying. Yeah, go ahead.
Evaluation in a MOOC, because professor is not present on his video recording. How does all of this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We're going to get to that in a minute, because that's the challenging part, right? And the title of our talk was what we often get wrong and how to fix it, because that question, for example, I've been working on this for past 7.5 years, working with, as part of my own doctoral research, as part of my, like with different instructors and faculties, as well as edtech practitioners. It's not an easy answer. I don't have an answer for you. Like, how does this work in a large scale MOOC setting? How does this work in a high stakes environment? I don't have an easy answer for you, but what I can tell you is that the answer lies in a careful balance between those three, right? And that balance could look different from one course to another. If you more meaningfully introduce learner-to-learner interaction, you can reduce the need of learner-to-faculty or the need for learner-to-faculty interaction. Yesterday, incidentally, what I'm assuming all of you were at the cruise yesterday, we're just having a quick chat with Anand Agarwal, and he mentioned that, I may be afraid of forgetting the numbers, but he mentioned that as part of some research that at 2U, what they found as part of their analysis was that the ratio between what learners want in terms of a connection with faculty versus with some sort of AI is 299 to 1. Meaning that 299 out of, 299 to 1 students preferred to engage instantly with some sort of AI and completely opting out of wanting to engage with faculty. So it's really not that big of a logistical issue. Even for large-scale MOOCs, there are ways to get around it through moderation and things like that, which we'll talk about in a minute. I hope that answers partially your question, but yeah. Okay, so, and again, just very, very quickly, Aston's theory of involvement from 84, and then again, it just proposes that students learn more when they're involved in various academic and social aspects of the college experience. Again, remember, this was done in the context of undergraduate education and not for online learning. But interestingly, if you look at the 7 principles of good undergraduate education that they proposed with the lens of engagement, we believe that many of those principles still apply to online learning. I'll leave it on the screen for a second if you want to go through them, or maybe I'll say them out loud. Student to faculty contact, cooperation among students. So that's the first two dimensions of what we talked about, peer-to-peer and peer-to-faculty. Active learning as opposed to passive, prompt feedback, timely, targeted, time on task, which is obviously has to be adequate, high expectations, which you can connect to the idea of desirable difficulties, making sure that the tasks are matched to the cognitive level of the students, and the respect for diverse talents and ways of learning. So given that this is 1984 and we're in 2025, I can't see any of those that would not be relevant today. And that partially answers the questions that you had previously asked. So with that context, I wanted to talk about this notion of the very inherently paradoxical nature of measuring learning, which I think is very counterintuitive. I couldn't articulate it better than that, but Graham Nuthall, in his famous book, The Hidden Lives of Learners, says that students can be busiest and most involved with material that they already know. And in most of the classrooms that they had studied, each student already knew about 40 to 50% of what the teacher was teaching or training. This, again, applies to online learning. And I can link, for those of you that are interested, I have a list of 10 to 12 very carefully curated articles that replicated these studies, found very similar results in online learning. So again, what does that mean? So the Nuthall's notion of the appearance of learning is not limited to classrooms. It's very much prevalent in online learning. Think number of clicks, response rates, completion certificates, dropout rates, how much time students are spending on a module or a page, or how many attempts they take to complete something, is very much what I would call a poor proxy of learning. That doesn't mean we should not be measuring those analytics. Of course, we need to be measuring those learning. Those platform analytics are absolutely essential, but they're not a good indicator of engagement. They're not a good indicator of engagement, and I would invite for any of you, if you would like to share or challenge that. Again, very, very welcome. But those, according to Rob Coe, and if you're interested, read research from other scholars within the science of learning field, like Daniel Willingham from University of Virginia, Carl Hendrick, have found to have a very similar outcome of that. Now, Rob Coe also talks about the idea that most of the learning itself is invisible, and so the techniques that we need to use to measure those also have to target the invisible parts, right? Okay, so maybe you want to...
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing we should have prefaced our talk was by saying that one of the reasons that we're talking more about theories and the academic context and reviewing the contemporary literature is because both of us have been talking about engagement for a number of years, including for 5 years at this conference. And so what we found effective as practitioners is that going to the source, reviewing the literature, and making sure that our recommendations are aligned with currently established best practices, not relying on so-called edu-myths, things like, things that are just, let's say, sometimes marketing gimmicks. And so that's one reason that we, maybe made our talk a little bit boring by just starting by talking about theories. So having said that about just talking about the appearance of learning, where, for example, as an instructor, you're not a mind reader. People can be making eye contact with you, and you're going to assume that they're engaged, or they're pretending to read, or appear to be reading. And so that's, appearance of learning in a classroom setting. I would like to hear thoughts on how you think learning, could be, how learners online could pretend to be learning in an online context, and what that might look like. Interested in hearing thoughts on that, where you can just, not be able to focus on the invisible part of learning, which is basically like 90% of learning.
In other words, what's the online equivalent of a student just nodding and appearing to say, yes, I understand it, and they're raising their hands, but they're not really cognitively engaged? What's the online equivalent of it, if there is one, or if you've observed one? Clicking next.
Yeah, that's the common one, just next.
Yeah. So being distracted through other, okay.
watching the video, but also using the phone at the same time.
Yeah,
Okay.
so registering watch time, but not actually engaging with the content. Yeah, absolutely. And so some other options might be, just posting actively in a discussion forum, or not mentally engaging with an assignment, just defaulting to using ChatGPT and, coming up with a response or coming up with your assignment. So we can think of a lot of examples of where learners can, stay hidden from you. You're not able to measure learning. And like Asad was talking about, we're only able to measure 10% of the visible learning. And then the rest of the iceberg, the 90%, that stays hidden both in an in-person setting and online. And so one of the ways to improve engagement is to be able to measure the invisible part of engagement, being able to create strategies that allow us to zero in on that invisible learning.
Yeah. And now you might ask, how exactly do you do that? How exactly do you measure that 90% which is invisible? You see, if you're in the field of education technology or in the field of instructional design, learning design, you're creating some sort of learning interventions, you find yourself engaging not only with needs analysis, writing the outcomes, working with curriculum, writing materials, publishing a course, authoring, working with authoring tools. If you're working more on the tech side, you're maintaining the platform itself. There's so much that goes into it, and for many of us, we don't have the luxury of doing it A to Z with the help of a dedicated team. Sometimes you're wearing multiple hats and you're doing many things. You're the author of the course. You're working in Open edX Studio, and you're the instructional designer, or you're the e-learning developer. Sometimes you're also doing needs analysis. Sometimes, and that's the reality of it. So, in the best interest of time, and we're not going to talk about all of the other strategies like assessment. We'll focus and just on one of those things, which may be very, very quickly, because I'm mindful of the time. I think it's 4:56. We have two activities here, which the idea is that, let's say they're part of an English language or communication course. And the learning outcome, the desired learning outcome is that you want learners to understand how variations in authoring styles or writing styles can have an impact on how the piece of writing is perceived or conceived or interpreted by the audience. Which of those options, 1 versus 2, would you think would be a good activity or a good activity to include to meet that outcome? I don't think we're going to have time for it, but maybe like a couple minutes. And
So one of the things we can do is to look at activity 1 first and see what we think is effective about that. So feel free to take a minute to read it, and then raise your hands which you think is effective about how this activity is designed, and what's effective about how it's engaging learners.
Activity 1 has compare and contrast between the 2 articles. That deepens knowledge. So hopefully that also leads to some retention of that knowledge. And article of activity 2 is discovery. Could go terribly wrong depending on the level of the students, but it might also help them. But I would choose activity 1.
Awesome. Are there any other insights on why activity 1 is effective, or how activity 1 is effective? And feel free to guess, by the way. Yep, we just.
Activity 2 seems a little superficial to me, because the students just need to recall the titles and place them on a diagram.
Okay.
anyone else? Okay, great insights. Now, the idea is, for a second, I want you to think about what this would look like in an online course. If you were creating a MOOC and activity 2 or activity 1 was present, and you only had access to the results in the form of analytics. The learner could very well access all of the, or follow all of the tasks or subtasks within activity 2, and they would fully meet all the criteria. But would that mean that the learner was engaged or not? And same thing for activity 1. You don't have to answer, but think about it.
I think what may also be good to know is how the room feels about which activity is better. So if you had to add one to your course, activity 1 or 2, we'll do it by the raise of hands, which one would you add to your course? So everyone for activity 1, please raise your hand. Okay, so around 10 people. In activity 2, yeah, around the same people basically.
Yeah, it does seem to be
great
easier,
insight.
and that's a really good point. Now, just quickly, some of the background. These activities were taken from the Deans for Impact 2020 report. Is everyone familiar with Deans for Impact? For those of the colleagues from the US, probably yes, or from North America. So it's basically just a coalition of college deans from the United States. It's an initiative where they research and work to incorporate the science of learning, the cognitive principles, neuroscience, and train teachers, teacher candidates, and instructional designers to be able to better create learning products in their courses. In the 2020 report that they did, they included that same activity, and I think they surveyed about 10,000 candidates. I could be wrong on the number. Only 22% of the candidates picked activity 1. The remaining teachers and just all of the people that were educators, they picked activity 2. They were not, and that's part of the problem, right? So that's why we often get learning engagement wrong, because we have not engaged with learning or the theories and principles of learning engagement scientifically or cognitively, right? So if you're not a cognitive scientist, if you're not a neuroscientist, I know there may be some in the room and you may know all of this stuff, but many of the instructional designers and teachers, it's not a reality. It's not part of training programs. Many of the instructional design, instructional systems designs, trainings, and master's level programs never talk about that. You just circumvent and bypass those things and just talk about things like, Merrill's principles, like the basic stuff, and that's it. It stops there.
And one of the takeaways from that study actually was that teachers have their own interpretation of what engagement is. They think that people are engaging with them, and so they'll say, oh, this actually works for me. And so the idea for this pilot was to maybe reach out to around 1,000 teaching candidates and see how they feel about these different things, and are they aligned with the best practices and the established science on these topics. And in many cases, they found that they weren't. And so the goal was to train them through these ideas and see if that helps improve classroom outcomes.
And these are the top reasons from the remainder of the candidates that they use. And like you said, because it's easier. And because they felt that they would have learned better using this activity, so it must be the right one, and hence that's what they included. They felt that it was more fun and engaging because it includes some sort of a scavenger hunt or something like that. Now, those are good things, but if something is fun and it's not delivering what it is meant to deliver, then it's garbage. And same thing, you can see things about edu myths like learning styles and things like that, which have no scientific basis. They've been heavily debunked. They're not real. They're not true. But that's prevalent, right? So not much has changed since 2020. And again, for those of you that are interested, I can share a list of some of the recent publications and articles that we have done as part of the analysis. What else is there? Yeah, more hands-on and memorable. And these are what I call the vanity metrics, because they give the appearance of engagement, appearance of learning. You feel that it's more fun, it's more engaging, you're doing something. But as part of that, you're not really learning. You're just engaged in something, which is not learning, right? So that's the key thing.
Maybe this one. So students learn the best when they don't know what they're learning. So that's a common one. A lot of teachers think that if they can trick students into learning, that's when best learning happens. When in fact we know that's not the case. If people are aware that they're going to be learning something, they can invoke the necessary parts of their brain to actually improve the quality of the learning experience.
Thank you for actually that reminder. When I was putting that slide together, I I underlined that one because I wanted to say, for those of you, if there's one thing, if there's one key takeaway that you can have from it, it would be that one. That statement right there could not be farther from the truth. If you're not cognitively engaged, if you don't know the purpose of the activity, you are not going to learn. And we'll get to that as part of the suggestions that we have and how exactly do we do that, right? So we're just going to set some perspective talking about what are some of the ways in which you can foster more meaningful engagement. Sarah, correct us if we're wrong. We have 10 about 10 minutes. Okay, so we'll take like 2-3 minutes each, and then we'll just open it for questions. Again, understanding and recognizing, fully cognizant of the fact that there's so much that goes into it, we're not going to be able to talk about exactly what needs to happen. But these 3 things I think would be a good steps in the right direction. Number 1 is design for interactional synchrony. What that means is that make sure that there are natural and ample opportunities for all of the 3 of those dimensions. Even if it's a large-scale MOOC, talk to your platform providers, talk to your instructional designers, talk to the people about how you can integrate those opportunities. So again, like you were asking, how would you do instructor to faculty contact? It's difficult, but could you get creative and design more meaningful discussion forums where you have a moderation component? Could there be AI-based moderation that can facilitate that where the first pass is done? I don't know. Those are, again, and I'm not going to claim that we have had a lot of success with all of those. So I want to caveat that with that, right? We're all in the same boat when it comes to, getting the success that we want to get, but there are promising results, right? So I really do want to caveat that it's not that we have nailed it and we're just like suggesting something. We're struggling with some of those things ourselves, but we have received and we have obtained some promising results through our work, which is what we're using to stay optimistic and hopeful. So again, make sure that there are those ample opportunities, and your job is to provide learners with meaningful content, meaningful integration opportunities, and leave and provide them with the autonomy to decide where they want to go from there, right? That notion of controlling anything and everything within a MOOC environment is where part of the issue comes from. So if you're more focused on those engaging metrics about the number of clicks and less focused on what they do with the content, what they do after, and then getting more from the what Frederick calls the behavioral to the social and the emotional domain. I think that would be the one thing. And again, what are some of the platform features which we can use? Search functionality. This sounds very counterintuitive, but as part of some of the research, we surveyed a lot of students, was that being able to know what they're going to go through in the remainders of the course had a huge impact. It allowed learners to feel more empowered because they weren't following a rigid structure of page by page or module by module, but they were actually able to know what else the course entails, which basically provides more face value of relevance. And they understand, okay, I want to stick around and go to the end of it because they know what else is there. Sure, you can do that through navigation panels, look at the unit titles or module titles, but it's not the same thing. Same thing, free navigation, allowing back and forth navigation without losing learner progress is one. Dynamic glossaries, global glossaries within your platform, especially for if you're using clusters of courses as part of a learning program, is one. Chatbots or AI-based moderation in discussion forums, annotation tools, simulations, timely and meaningful feedback, which is basically part of that. Task explanations, which could be AI-based or could be manually written. And same, like we discussed previously, structured and unstructured peer discussions. The last one I wouldn't talk about because it's very hard to do. I've never been successful with that one, so I don't know if it's even possible. But the second suggestion that we have is just not shy away from talking about metacognition within your courses, meta communication. Talk about how learning works and bake that into the very content of the course. And that's what we call like the face value. So if you have an activity and the learner has no idea why that activity is there, you've disengaged them. You've disengaged them right there. They need to know why they're engaging with a certain activity. What's the point of that activity? How is it going to help them understand a particular concept? Especially in the case of complex ones, is super important. it activates a metacognitive boost where they know, I understand why I'm supposed to do this, and there's a tendency to engage with it in a more meaningful way because they see what's in it for me. If they don't see what's in it for me, it's a classic recipe to disengage learners. And yeah, some of the platform features, I think we don't have time, but
Yeah, we should skim through the rest.
yeah, we have done
Questions.
some good work, and if for those of you that are interested, like there are some learning logs and contemplate like the learning journals that we have developed and have had some good results with.
Yeah, we're
So
also
we're
grateful
happy to
have
show
been like
those.
partnering with some of the organizations that people in this room represent, and we've built X blocks and other functionality for open edX pertaining to these specific platform features and metrics.
And the last one is just going beyond the vanity metrics. So we talked about, for example, I'll promise 30 seconds. One of the ones, let's say if you're interacting the number of posts, because you were saying like, you could be posting in a discussion forum while using your phone, or you could be watching something while using your phone, or you're making 7 contributions to a discussion forum, but cognitively they're not in depth, they're not engaged. Now, if you're looking at the metrics of number of forum contributions, you could see that the learner is really engaged. But a better metric to do that would be network analysis of forum contributions, right? So who interacts with whom? What's the centrality measure of it? What's the reciprocity measure of it? For example, are most people responding to one person's posts? There has to be something. It must be worth looking into. Is there a decent balance between reciprocity, or are more people just writing new posts and some are simply responding to posts created by somebody else? Is a good metric to measure as opposed to just the number of posts. So not assigning relative values and weightage to the types of posts. Not all posts are equal. And this is just in the context of discussion forum. And we have other examples, but again, sorry, we had a 45-minute slot. So we had to focus and zone in just on that one. And with that, I would say, yeah, like and for those of you who have the luxury or who have a psychometrics division within your organization who works with data analysis and takes the feedback from the learners and uses those numbers, definitely look into indices like discrimination indices, facility values of your tasks and your questions, the items that you've written, so that you better understand why something is working. Why is it that the same questions and the same things are working for a part of the students and not the others? And with that, yeah, with that, we'll stop. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer those. Sorry for the rush. Any questions at all?
Our comments.
Or comments and feedback, yes, please.
Thank you. I'm from a University of Technology, and I was triggered by your remark about the meta cognition. So we have a number of teachers that have tried to let the students reflect on their work and create a program or kind of plan to improve. But since these students are really involved in technique and not so much in, as they call it, soft skills, or well, they have even other terms for that. They're not really engaged in that. So do you have any tips to make them more engaged, and especially on these metacognition factors, so to say?
And is that in context of online learning or in classroom?
That is, well, in both cases.
Mm-hmm.
This is done in an on-campus situation.
Got it.
So even then, the teacher has, well, kind of more interaction with the students, and they can also see what they're doing with the. But in an online setting, we also try this, and then it even worked less effective. So.
And I would assume that those students are STEM students, so,
Yeah.
Engineering students. Okay, I'm not surprised, because a lot of universities, a lot of engineering faculties tend to face that kind of issue. And what I would say is, I think part of it just boils down to making sure that the students do understand the value of metacognition. And it needs to be, I don't know the word in English. For those of you that speak French in the room, and think in French we say vulgariser, to what's the, yeah, to explain it in a way that they understand, like to take the technical scientific concept and really explain it in a way they understand the value of it. I'm sure there has to be a word for it.
Relatable?
Yeah, relatable, but also, yeah, sorry, I'm losing my English right now, but the idea is to be able to explain it in a way that they understand the value of it. Because the thing is, metacognition is not intuitive. Sometimes you don't understand why you need to do it, why the brain works, because not everybody understands the information processing model. Not everybody understands how the brain works. Now, not everybody understands what's the value of retrieval, what's the value of forgetting, what's the value of, right? So these are technical concepts. So yeah, I think the teachers first need, or the instructional designers need to be first trained on why they're doing it, and being able to really explain it in very simple terms. I think would be one way, but yeah, probably not very helpful, but I can think of other ways and get it right to you if you want. Thank you.
Ready?
Good catch.
Good catch.
I do have a question. What about when the students do not want to engage in forums and things like that? Let's say students that have some social anxieties and things like that. How would be? Because I understand why question 2 doesn't work. I agree, but question 1 doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
So what would be a different way of creating engagement without rendering this mandatory? The interaction with other, not the teachers, but other students mandatory.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I had almost that exact same questions 4 years ago at the Open edX conference when I was talking in a different context. I love that question simply because this is very hard to meet. My advice would be, first and foremost, to not make any discussion forums, any discussion posts mandatory. Like I said, the number of posts are irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. I don't care. I'm more interested in the value, and that's why the network analysis is more important. Like thinking, sometimes I've seen responses from one student where they only made 2 forum contributions, but they were far more superior than students who were making 10 per week, right? So it's difficult, logistically very challenging, but one thing you can do is not make any discussion forum contributions mandatory, but what you can make mandatory is that they have to engage with it cognitively, and there are other ways in which you can provide that feedback. So again, incidentally, in the conversation with Anand Agarwal yesterday, he mentioned inline, what's the term?
Forums.
Inline discussion forums. So for example, if you're watching a video and there's a concept that you engage with within that video, and you're like, oh, you're curious about something. In the platform, in the LMS, you shouldn't have to go to a separate section of the course where there's a discussion forum, week 2, post number, whatever, engage with it, post number. No, it's inline discussion forum where you can engage with that concept right there and then, and there should always be a possibility of posting anonymously. So we built some customizations on top of the Open edX discussion forum for some of our work, where we did work, I don't know the term that we use, but like I'm forgetting the term, but we made some customizations to make that part exactly possible. And I'm happy to show you some demo of it if you're interested.
We actually talked about it more at length last year in South Africa.
Yeah.
So there's a talk called Bring Discourse Back to the Classroom. So we shared case studies and examples of things where we've actually tested different strategies for addressing exactly what you said, and how to improve the quality of discourse, how to encourage discourse without making it mandatory, and still be able to leverage it as an effective way to improve learner engagement in a meaningful way. So we can share a link with you for that, and also share some examples and some of the work that we've done on that in the past.
Thanks, great.
Thank you for that question. Yes.
Sure.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, super interesting. I don't have a very deep question. I'm just more generally curious about the research that you looked at, and if there was a distinction between sort of younger adults, like college age, versus older working adults, or did you find that the research for best practices around learning design was pretty much the same, or were there differences?
Thank you for that question. I think purposefully we felt that it was fair and it made sense to focus on adult learning contexts only. So right off the bat, it's only adult learning context that we've looked at, nothing K-12. But within adult learning, we have not looked at sub-demographics like that. So a lot of the research, there was overlap and crossover, actually a lot of crossover in those best practices from workplace, enterprise, corporate learning contexts to other type of adult learning settings. Many of them were similar to nonprofit sectors where they were, adult literacy, people who had dropped out of school and were reintegrating back into the education or taking their GEDs or things like that. But a lot of crossover between those sectors, even though, so we didn't make it sector specific or define sub-demographics within it. That's a good idea. It might be interesting to look at if there are any.
Can I respond?
Oh, can you give her the microphone?
Yeah, for sure.
I think age is not the variable that you want to look at. I mean, what would your hypothesis be? A 60-plus-year-old. I think level of experience. That sometimes coincides with age because you have more experience in a certain field. But I think the difference between a novice, an intermediate, and an expert, and the way that they go about and take on new material is far more important to look at than age as a demographic, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's a great point and a great clarification. I think what I was wondering to myself was, when you have people who are actually going to college, and you're right, they can go to college at 60, doesn't matter. They're generally speaking, in very general terms, tend to have a little more time, a little more perhaps motivation. They're like dedicating a whole lot of time to, getting a degree, so on and so forth, compared to a working person who's really busy with a lot of other conflicting obligations and has less time, and is going to have more challenges, I think, committing more fully to a course. That's just been my perspective. It's a broad generalization, and it's not a comment on age. It's kind of a little bit more of a comment on sort of their time and their setting and what they're capable of.
No, that makes sense. Thank you. So I think if there's no other questions, we can wrap it up here. Thank you so much for coming, and very grateful for all the insights and everything that you've done to enrich the session. Thank you.